Dev, thank you for joining us. We've been in lockdown for about 4 months now, and retailers are reporting that the early spikes in sales growth are starting to tail off. What can they do to help retain those customers earned during the early days of lockdown?
I think, Aidan, one of the things we have to recognise here is that there was a significant shift in purchasing pattern created by lockdown. So I think the first thing that convenience retailers need to do, and most of them I'm speaking to, I believe, they're there now, is to be a bit pragmatic and say, look, we had a great opportunity in the first few months of lockdown where people were much more reliant on their local area. They were particularly scared to venture out, and that meant that your local convenience store became essential to your purchasing and your sustaining you, really. So, are we going to be able to sustain all of it by continuing to do the same stuff? No, absolutely not. So there is the really positive story, I would say, is that you've, as a retailer, had a great opportunity to re-engage and reconnect with your local community. You've had an opportunity to show how good you are, and an opportunity to build relationships with them. That's the real positive. But to continue to do the same stuff now is going to lead to exactly what you said, Aidan, which is a decline in sales. So I think retailers really need to start resetting what they're doing, really. And I would say fundamentals, whether it's service, availability, focus on it, they're still the really key things that will continue to drive people to convenience stores. In the papers that I wrote, I'm often talking about space and about making sure that your convenience store is a place that customers can feel they can comfortably socially distance. If you look at most of the independent surveys that have been done of consumers, there's a significant amount of sentiment out there from consumers who still feel that confined spaces are unsafe. So I would declutter and continue to declutter and just keep looking at your store and making it an easy place to operate. I mean, let's be honest, convenience stores often have been full and filled with merchandising and shelving. We're going to have to be a bit brave and bold about that going forward. The impact of masks, hope might have a positive impact where there's a portion of the population that still can kind of continue to feel safe. But I would say that principle of making your shop socially distant compliant, I think, is still going to be a non-negotiable, as I call it. I think in one of the papers, you've got to really focus on that. In terms of bigger changes, though, if I was running a convenience store right now, I would think about really how customers are changing. So we know that you've got an opportunity to probably shift your model a little bit based upon how customers are revising their day. So we know that the offices in city centres are still predominantly closed. There are skeleton workforces, and the mode of working from home has become incredibly common. We speak to food operators in particular, and they talk about shifting day parts and how having a significantly higher proportion of the workforce sitting in their local areas has meant that out-of-town opportunities, so your local sandwich operator, your local kind of petrol forecourt that's really good at food to go, is now benefiting from the fact that all these people are at home. But equally, we're looking at evenings in a very different context as well. When, as a food business, one thing we always used to focus on was something called the indulgence curve, where at the beginning of the week, people were much more health conscious, and towards the end of the week, it tailed off and they were much more focused on indulgence. And we also used to talk about kind of breakfast, lunch and dinner as being kind of day parts that people tended to use in the same way. Breakfast often on the go, missed, and not focused on enough, and a big sales opportunity. Lunch as being sustenance, and then evening as being indulgence. Well, if we're all working from home, that's kind of gone a bit topsy-turvy now. So I know lots of people that are looking for a bit of a break and looking for indulgent lunch and having kind of healthy evening meals. I don't have access to a coffee shop in my house, so I'm looking for my convenience store to give me that bit of dopamine and sustenance throughout the day. And also, I don't have time to cook a meal at lunchtime. I'm not, just because I'm home and I'm working from home, it doesn't mean that I've got an hour, to put down the laptop and go and make myself a nutritious meal. I'm literally running out the door. and buying stuff to keep me going throughout the day, whether it's a chocolate bar for the afternoon or my lunch. So I've been talking quite heavily about food to go, but I'm focusing on it as an example as how you need to focus on missions in order to grow your sales. So think about your customers, speak to your customers, and understand what their change of lifestyle is, and then start to accommodate that in what you're offering in big terms. I would even say now is not the time to focus on category. Now is absolutely the time to focus on missions. You've got lots of opportunities out there because lifestyles have changed. You're much more likely to access people's food for later. If you can provide compelling meal solutions for the evenings, people are spending less time in their cars. They'll be much more open to going to your store and buying a good, whether it's ready meal or full meal solution for the evening, if you can do it in a way that's both convenient and provides the quality that they need. And there are, you can see subtle changes now. Even my local store, the amount of fresh food that he's offering from pre-COVID is like night and day. He's suddenly realised that he's got a great opportunity to be a place that customers can come to for 2 or 3 times a week to get tonight's meal. So it's definitely, for me at this stage, not about categories, it's about missions. You'll get to categories eventually, but just think customer. What else can I be doing for them? How have they changed, and how can I build a sales platform off the back of that?
And to accommodate these new shopper missions, retailers will have to expand their range, but this comes at a time when maybe the multiples are delisting a lot of products. Does that prove a bit risky for convenience retailers?
No, I think it's definitely worthwhile. I think do it sensibly. Do you need 5 flavours of bleach? I would argue no. But do you need to have perhaps a couple of flavours of pesto? Probably yes, because that's where the market is going. When you look at SKU rationalisation in supermarkets, I think part of that is because they couldn't get all their SKUs, let's be fair. I saw one site, a big box multiple that had 16 linear meters and two biscuit SKUs in it. That's not something you would do intentionally. You'd do that because there are certain products that you just couldn't get hold of. But I think what they are doing is that's an ongoing journey. What they've done is they've had to rationalise, because if you look at the largest, the extra type formats, they were always built with too much space anyway. So they've moved that along, I think, on a journey that was already happening. I don't think you should ever equate a 3,000 square foot and below convenience store to those kind of 50,000, 60,000 square foot monsters. The way that we shop those places, what we're expecting is so different. I would, extending categories where it's needed is definitely a good thing.
Okay, cool. And speaking of the multiples, there's a bit of a price war coming. What can convenience retailers do to survive this?
Many of the things that convenience retailers did before, this isn't the first price war we're facing into, but I think it's going to be the most aggressive. Convenience retailers have always had the trump card, which is their role in the community, and how responsive they can be to their local community. And they've demonstrated that in spades over the last 3 months, very well publicised, how important and vital convenience retailers have been for sustaining us as a nation. So I think build those community stories. Don't fight battles you're unlikely to win. Don't fight on price. I'm a very, very strong opponent of being too aggressive on promotions. I know that goes against probably some of the providers and symbol groups, but I wouldn't be throwing away margin on promotions. I would, where the promotions are supported and can drive value and price perception, great, but don't throw away a margin on key categories because it's pointless. We've been doing it for years in convenience, and I do really question whether it adds great value. But I would be focusing on the areas where you've got a very strong story, a strong message, and something that the mults can't necessarily compete with. And a lot of that is on story, community, how you can be agile, you can respond to specific needs of customers, and recognise that the main benefit of convenience is convenience. It's not for me to get in a car, to drive for 10 to 15 minutes, go through the inconvenience of going into a large multiple to pick up, multiple shops in a week. We all stopped doing that a while ago. The data is very, very clear. We got into a mode of more frequent shopping. We're in smaller households now as well. I still think we'll migrate to one big shop, but those top-ups during the week is absolutely the ground where convenience stores need to be making sure that they've got a massive share of the of voice and a share of the income that's there and the customer spend. So I would say make your stores really, really geared towards that top-up shop. And that goes back to my point. Do you need 4 flavors of Domestos in order to do that? Probably not. But what it might mean is that you can rationalize certain areas of your store where your sales and your data supports it, and then extend other areas.
And finally, are you seeing trends from other countries that maybe UK retailers could benefit from?
Asia is really interesting. When I've been on a few webinars with retailers from Asia and suppliers and providers, I would say Southeast Asia has been very, very well supported by technology to help support frictionless and touchless retail. So they're very big on things like facial recognition and biometrics to support payment. We've got a very different landscape around data protection and the legislation such as GDPR. So putting in things like biometrics is a lot more difficult. But I think there is a general theme here. Tech is will be one of the areas that moves on significantly because of the pandemic. One of the statistics that I was often quoted was that 4 in 5 people have got a smartphone. That was pre-COVID. So the key message there is there are 20% of your customers that don't, and you need to ensure that they have that you're not kind of disenfranchising them. I suspect that figure is going to be 1 in 10 coming out of COVID. And I know a number of people that are now buying their elderly parents' smartphones, whether it's to support video calling or the future track and trace. So that number is going to become smaller. So we should be a lot braver around using technology going forward. That would be a key thing for me. Is it's going to be ubiquitous. You've got to be either using some of the existing tech solutions that are out there, but making sure you're very clear on the cost and the end-to-end model. Or if you're feeling really bold, develop your own solutions if you've got the scale to do it.
Thank you very much. Dev, thank you very much for your time. This is Aidan Fortune for Convenience Store.